I think I'm looking at my clock. 4. I think it's 4 o'clock. I think we'll officially begin. So here we are. I'm adjusting my screen to gallery view. So as you all join us, I'll be able to see you. Welcome. I'm Amelia Bensusan. This is my partner in crime, Cynthia Ryder, Managing
Hello, everybody.
Director. We welcome you to our third Seen and Heard Live. So just 3 weeks ago, when we had the idea that instead of just sending my Seen and Heard emails, I would actually, we would talk to you in this, through this format. So I'm really thrilled that you keep joining us. We have so far 87 of you joining us today. So
Fantastic.
we're really, really thrilled. The idea behind this platform is really a very casual virtual cocktail party. You can come and go, absolutely. We'll keep it to an hour. And it's really meant to continue the conversation. Theater is for me, the ultimate conversation. And this way, at least, we get to speak to each other about the theater. We're not under any illusions that we're making theater through this platform. This is really just meant as a way to stay in touch, stay connected, and very specifically this week to look forward at a time when looking forward isn't always easy. So I'm going to quickly glance at my notes over here. So now you can always tell when I'm looking at my notes. But I think what I'm supposed to do next is hand it over to you, Cynthia. Oh, I did want to do one thing, and I'm going to start with the sadness, and we'll look forward. I hope many of you saw the Amelia's picks on the Seen and Heard that came out on Saturday. And, you know, the notion of those is really to sort of draw attention to what folks connected to Hartford Stage, past and future, are up to. It was easy this week. It was the history of comedy, which we will be presenting, and more on that anon. And also Remembrance of Terrence McNally. I don't know how many of you got to hear Lips Together, Teeth Apart, but it was really quite wonderful with some great interviews connected to that. And the one, of course, that breaks my heart today, I don't know if you got to see Kevin Bacon, who, of course, from Rear Window, and Kira Sedgwick, but they were singing in honor of John Prine. So it's hard that we start these broadcasts, if you will, remembering folks who've left us, but I'm a huge John Prine fan and thinking of him at this time. So a moment there, and to say, you know, to quote Beckett out of context, we can't go on, but we do go on, we will go on. And so, in speaking of going on, how's that for a segue? I'll hand it over to Cynthia.
Thank you. Well, along with the grief, we're also trying to do some things that are just a little bit fun. So we actually have a cocktail or mocktail, specialty cocktail, like we do at the theater for every show. So we've made one up. Again, my husband, Stuart, is an incredible bartender, and we made one up in honor of Amelia this week. He came up with Amelia's Liberation, which is 2 ounces of rum or tequila, 2 ounces of cranberry, 2 ounces of orange juice, and then a big squeeze or lime or lemon, and you top it off with soda. Of course, you can do that without the alcohol as well if you're not in the mood yet to quite jump into cocktail hour. But if you are, that's a wonderful one to do. I want to let you know that we are working on the remainder of this season, and very soon we'll have some announcements around what our plans are for A Wilderness, which was scheduled to run in May, and The Complete History of Comedy early June. So check back here soon next week. We'll have something to share with you, if not before that. We also want to remind people that subscriptions for next season are now on sale. We have announced 4 of the 6 titles, and we talked some about that last week, and we'll be talking a lot more about it today. You see here on your screen the 4 shows, and today we're really going to focus on the world premiere of Simona's Search. So a lot more coming on that. One of the best ways you can support Hartford Stage or any arts and culture organization that you are particularly fond of and connected to is to resubscribe right now. That gesture of support for us that says you're willing to invest in the future work of an organization is incredibly valuable any year, and it could not be more valuable at this time to have that kind of support. If you're able to add a donation onto that, please do. If you aren't ready to subscribe but would like to make a donation, all of those things can be done at hartfordstage.org. We still have a $50,000 challenge match out that we're working to get, and we are right there. We are so close to that 50,000. So your gifts tonight could put us over that edge. So we'd love to have people go online to hartfordstage.org and donate, or most important, renew your subscriptions for next year. So I'll turn it back over to Amelia.
Thanks. Bear with us. We're still figuring out this platform. So week 3, I do feel a little more on top of it, but you know, your patience is appreciated. Remember now, I was going to start lecturing you about how to use Zoom, but no, I won't. Scott, will you jump on as our job descriptions have shifted at this odd time, Scott is now our Zoom engineer. And there too is the extraordinary Martin Zimmerman. Welcome. I'll introduce Martin in a moment. I'll let Scott sort of explain the order of operations as we go through. And there's Sin Martinez. More to come on these two folks. Scott, tell us how to do this.
Yeah, we're keeping it really simple. So you are all attendees today for over the next hour, and that affords you a couple of options. Once we get to the proper moment, you can ask a question. There's a Q&A box down at the bottom. There's also a chat box down at the bottom. So if you have a question, or if you have some trouble in trying to figure things out on this platform, feel free to message us and we could do our best to help you out. And then there's also an option to raise your hand. So if you have a question and you'd like to vocalize your question, we'll unmute you. We'll see that your hand is raised and you can ask a question. That's pretty much the basic opportunities that you have in this platform today. And yeah, we're looking forward for the next hour.
Amelia, you have to unmute.
Unmute.
You did it.
So many people would like to have that button for me at their fingertips. I think some of the people I live with now. I've gotten a couple of texts from you. If you're in the waiting room and you can see me, but you're not yet on video, don't worry. We're going to bring you on once you're introduced. So bear with us. First, to talk about Simona's Search, are one of the plays that we're doing next season that we're thrilled to be premiering is the playwright Martin Zimmerman. Martin has been widely produced at most of the country's leading theaters with great collaborators, directors, and actors of great renown. Among his plays, now I'm going to turn to my notes, so forgive me, but among his plays are Seven Spots on the Sun, On the Exhale, which we'll be hearing more about as well, White Tie Ball, The Making of a Modern Folk Hero, The Solid Sand Below, and Let Me Count the Ways. He's also the creator and executive producer on Netflix's Puerta 7, a writer-producer on Netflix's Ozark, was a writer on Netflix's Narcos, and is playwright in residence at Teatro Vista. And in all his spare time, he's writing more plays so that we can we have the privilege of producing it. And joining us to read a scene from Simona's Search, as we did a couple of weeks ago with Jeffrey Hatcher, we're making playwrights read their plays. I don't know, Martin, you'll tell us if it's a form of torture or not. But Sin Martinez, known to many of you, is an extraordinary performer, creator, and playwright here in the Hartford area, part of Heartbeat Ensemble. Hello, Sin, bienvenida. And Sin's wonderful play Pegao premiered last year on Heartbeat's main stage. They both have so many more credits, but I really want to get us more into conversation, so you'll forgive me the brief intros. Rachel Alderman joins us, artistic associate at Hartford Stage, without whom these things would not be happening. So my thanks to Rachel and to Scott. And Martin, I'll hand it over to you on that note, if that's, and let us, if you could share with us a little bit about the play and where we are.
Yeah, this play is a play that I have been working on for several years now. Worked on it at a variety of places, La Jolla Playhouse, CTG in LA, City Theater in Pittsburgh, developed it at all of those different places. The seed of the play was an article I actually read about a woman who studied generational trauma, who was the daughter of survivors of trauma, and some of the research that she was trying to do about developing a medication that would try and take a traumatic memory and rob it of its pain. And obviously it's not entirely what the play is about, but it was sort of the seed of it, asking myself that who is this person, what are their personal relationships like with their parents, and what are the sort of complicated questions that stem from trying to do this thing. What are the complicated ethical questions of also just what are the interpersonal dynamics that would drive us? So that was the seed of this play. And I, just to give a little bit of context about what you're going to hear, this play is about a young woman, Simona, and her relationship with her father over many years, and all sort of stemming from an incident at her 10th birthday party, where she sees something that leads her to realize that her father is suffering from trauma in a way that she had never sort of considered before, and leads her to begin to realize that she knows almost nothing about his past. And part of what is referenced in this scene that you'll see is that he never taught her Spanish, even though he came, he was exiled from a country in Latin America. And so it's a lot of the play is about her sort of trying to understand what is driving her father and get at the heart of what he experienced that he has sort of walled off from her.
Great. So I think without further ado, Rachel, will you launch us? Rachel will be reading stage directions for this pass. Apologies to Sue Collins. We will bring you back to continue reading stage directions, and other folks who want to join us on readings as well. Don't give up on us. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Sin. And over to you, Rachel.
Great. So here we are in Simona's Search. We're in scene 5.
And the not-so-little girl tries using college to continue her quest on other fronts. She tries joining the Latino Student Union, determined to understand that part of herself. But the other students vault from English into Spanish so effortlessly, acrobatically, it intimidates her. And then when they talk about what it means to be Latino, their stories are always about family, friends, the people they bond with over music, rituals, food. But the girl hasn't shared her culture with anyone. So when they ask her about it, she's not sure what to say. Suddenly, her culture feels like an ill-fitting dress. Suddenly, she feels ashamed for all those times she went to the library, checked out those cassettes, all the times she listened to that music, thinking it was something she could ever own. So she stops going to the meetings, stops listening to the music, keeps studying Spanish because it's essential to her search. But other than that, she narrows her focus to the one thing she understands, channels all her energy into her studies. And when this just makes her nightmares worse, makes the dark figure's contours burn brighter and brighter in her sleep, she stops sleeping. Considers her insomnia a gift. Uses the extra time to get a job in a lab at school, win the admiration of all her professors, earn the highest GPA in her major, and a spot in a prestigious grad program where she nurses her insomnia like it's some secret weapon.
A coffee shop. Simona sits at a table for 2, reads, when another young grad student, Jake, approaches.
Hey, it's pretty late to be reading generational trauma and its effects on the families of torture survivors. Whoa, that is some heavy shit.
Huh?
I was just saying that once you hit 2 a.m., it should be like illegal to read something so
So,
heavy. Like shouldn't there be a rule that between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. you can only read like graphic novels
graphic novels?
or chick lit? Yeah, I didn't think so. I'm Jake. I apologize if I'm interrupting something important. It's just I've seen you here a lot lately, and since this happens to be my hangout as well, I thought I'd do the neighborly thing and introduce myself. So, hey,
You have a hard time sleeping too, Jake.
only at night. During the day, I can't seem to stop.
So then you're nocturnal,
Precisely.
like a hamster or house cat.
Or a vampire. Not that I am a vampire, though, of course, if I were a vampire, would I really be warning you about that ahead of time? Alas, I am a mere mortal who's sentenced to wander the underworld with all the other creeps and vagabonds until I occasionally bump into someone decent, like you.
And what exactly makes you think I'm decent, Jake?
Intuition.
Then you should probably get yours checked out because it's because it's in pretty shitty shape.
She returns to reading her book. He assumes that means the interaction has ended, so he starts off. Until she pushes out the other chair at her table with her leg, the screech of the sliding chair stops him in his tracks. He looks at the chair, at her. She does not look at him. Still, he goes out on a limb and sits, which seems to go well for him, or at least not badly, since she doesn't shout at him or give him a death stare or ask him what the fuck he's doing there. She just sits there, reading, until she looks up from her book to find he slid her a note. Your name? Without looking at him, she writes a response, slides it back to him. The instant he opens it, the lights flash. Suddenly, he's back at the edge of the space, bag slung over his shoulder. He scans the room, spots Simona seated at the same table, in the other chair this time, head buried in a book. He looks at her a long moment, but she does not look up. Not wanting to disturb her, he sets off in search of another seat. But the instant he passes her, she kicks out the other chair for him without looking up. As soon as he sits, she slides him an empty notebook, once again, without looking at him. He looks at it, confused. She takes it back, scribbles. Ask me something. He reads, nods, smiles, writes, and we see their conversation projected behind them.
They continue like this for weeks, sharing intimate details of each other's lives.
Scene.
Thank you. It's just a teaser. Really wonderful to hear the words out loud. And thank you so much, Sin. Thank you, Rachel. And we'll say bye to Sin and Rachel. Bring you back later for the Q&A piece, of course. And just want to talk to Martina a bit about this play and play development and what it means to, to have a play in development or announced, I would say, and how it feels right now, how it feels to hear the play and what your thoughts are about its production next year.
First of all, it's always exciting. And then I think immediately after the excitement, sort of, I think coupled with the excitement, there's also the sort of adrenaline about what has to be done, like what you want to keep doing to make it better, to sort
Right.
of I don't say the anxiety, but the excitement of like what you want to see happen before it goes up on its feet in front of an audience. So I think that those two things are coupled inevitably.
That's awesome. Let me bring on another guest, Jill Rafson, who is the Associate Artistic Director at The Roundabout and in charge of new play development there, and worked really closely with Martina on The Exhale. So we get to reunite, you guys. We were joking a little bit. This is a little, this is your life, Martin Zimmerman. As Jill comes on, I guess, one thing that interests me about, hi, Jill, welcome. I'm curious, I'd love to steer the conversation a little bit towards the development of Latinx playwrights as well. And Martin, you and I share a sort of similar history. I mean, your mother's from Argentina, my father's, I was raised in Mexico City, and sort of that sense of a parent having a past, which, you and I were talking about this. In a sense, all of us have a disconnect with our parents' pasts, and there's no way to really know what was going on for them or what they're bringing into their relationship with us. I find that a really very moving element of the play. It happens in this context that it's specifically a Latinx context about it. And I wonder, Jill, if you have thoughts on that as well, in terms of bringing in writers that have stories that are, of course, will resonate universally, but are seated in a specific geographic or cultural context?
Yeah, first of all, it's really just nice to see your face, Martine. I have to say, one of the things that I'm realizing as we try to bring more voices to the stage is that the more specific the stories are and the point of view is, the more universal the appeal seems to be. I think that everybody is so eager to learn from the very specific elements of other people's cultures that it actually ends up making it reach out to people in a completely different way, in a way that really allows them to latch on because they're not thinking about their own lives and then they are in the end. And I feel like that's happening no matter what specific culture you're presenting on stage.
That's great. I'm answering a question that was actually, I'm going to, instead of type the answer, I'm going to ask the question here of Martin, can you talk about the notes? Is your notion that the answers are projected? What Rachel read, was that projected, or is it live?
Yeah,
it just becomes an interesting piece here.
Yeah, I think, yes. Some of that is projected, and some of that then will the use of projection and the use of one of the things that you and I have talked about also throughout the play is the idea, the extent to which the relationship between storytelling and trauma, and the way in which there's certain viewpoints about trauma that basically say that one of the ways to sort of cope with trauma is to try and create a cohesive narrative out of it, which I guess is a little bit what we try and do in general with theater and storytelling, is try to sort of make meaning out of that which feels messy and uncontrollable. So I think one of the things that one of the visual elements is how do the projections sort of how are they a cohesive part of the storytelling that we hear, and then how do they clash with it as we see this woman trying to sort of make sense of her own inherited trauma and her father's trauma, and where does she struggle to make meaning of it? And so how do we see the sort of the dissonance and both the consonance between what we see projected and what she's telling us?
That's great. Jill and Martin, I mean, I realized that, especially when you guys work together and on the Exhale, being that it was a solo piece, I imagine the work with the actor was incredibly specific on that. And I wonder, at what point did the actor come in? At what point, how long had you two been working on that together? Just a little bit. And just to give a little more context, so On the Exhale premiered at the Roundabout, yes? And yes. Jill and Martin, did you have a relationship previous to that production where you worked together before Martin came to the Roundabout?
Yeah, we had met, and we had just sat down and talked plays. I don't remember how far in advance of that, but then I read this play after it had a reading at the Goodman as part of their New Stages Festival, and just fell in love with it. And so then we did a reading of On the Exhale at Roundabout, and with the actor who ended up performing it, Marin Ireland, who was so wonderful. And so luckily we sort of had the full package of the team really early on. And that allowed Martin, I think, to be really specific in the work in a way to basically torture Marin as little as possible, because a one-person show is such a project to take on for an actor. And so I really appreciated, Martin, that you sort of would do your revisions in very helpful chunks. So it wasn't just tooling away at it throughout as you might in other processes, but for this it was like, okay, let's respect how much information she has to keep in her head. And so the play development was sort of done in distinct units to make it easier for her to digest.
Yeah, and I think that I also think that that was partly curated by Lee Silverman, the fantastic director who we worked with as well. And I think that part of what was fascinating about that process too, which is I think that also something that will apply to Simona Search as we work on it, is that because it was a solo play, we really had a lot of the development wasn't even at a textual level at a certain point. It was just trying to figure out what her relationship to the audience is. And try to figure out like what is the logic, what is it that she needs from them, what is the nature of interaction with them, why is she telling the story, and I think that that's something that has made me it's made me even more conscious of that in the rest of my work moving forward, in terms of like why do we need these people right here, how can we engage with them, why does this actor, especially if they're speaking directly to the audience, why do they need them to complete the story, what do they need from them?
I love that. I'm going to invite someone else to join in this sort of spontaneous cocktail party conversation milieu as we talk about how we utilize actors, if that's fair, or how we're graced by actors. I'm going to invite another playwright to join us, Melinda Lopez from Boston, has been for years the playwright in residence at the Huntington Theater. In this sort of connectivity that we all have, Jill, I believe you know Melinda's work as well, and some of you, I hope, saw our production of Yerma, Melinda's extraordinary adaptation of Lorca. So there's we're both talking about hola, hello. Welcome, Melinda Lopez. Melinda, meet Martin. Martin, meet Melinda. Jill, Melinda.
Hi.
I don't know if, I think, Nadine, are you on yet? I don't think so. Nadine, oh, yes, you are. So I'm going to have Nadine Malouf, who played Yerma, join us as well. As we kind of discuss what it is that it means to put words in an actor's mouth, and where the dramaturg, the director, the playwright, the actor, how that all interfaces. And I guess I'd throw out to both of you, to Melinda and to Martin, since you both identify as Latinx playwrights, what does that mean about what actors can embody your language? And does it mean anything, or are you just American playwrights, right? Do you see where I'm sort of playing? And I assume it depends on the work, but I'd love to hear you all talk about this. And Nadine, if you can join us, we'll just, there we go. And hello, Nadine Malouf. Wonderful Nadine, who, as I mentioned, was in Yerma. I'm looking, Nadine, what show are you on? It's on, you've like done so many plays, and I'm trying to, but you're also on a show now on Hulu.
Yes.
High Fidelity.
High Fidelity on Hulu.
I got it. I remember.
I was
well,
pressing a play at the Public before the
you
world
were doing
changed.
Bright Room Call Day, Tony Kushner's Bright Room Call Day. So, to have a robust conversation here with you guys. Anybody want to tackle any version of any of what I just said?
I'll jump in because the play that I worked on with Amelia, with you and Nadine, was actually a translation of a Spanish play set in the 30s by Federico Garcia Lorca. And one of the reasons that I wanted to tackle this play was because I had never read an English translation that was speakable. Lorca's sort of a big favorite with academics and poets, and there's lots of translations that are very literal and express the words that Lorca wrote, but they're not playable for an actor. And so I was really excited to get my hands on that script and try to make the script sing in English. And to your question, and I guess Nadine can answer whether that worked or not, but to your point about what an actor brings, I'm often writing in two different languages in my head, even if I'm writing in English, but I'm thinking that the character is speaking Spanish. And so it sounds different. The English is different. If you've set a play in Latin America, say, but you're performing it for an English-speaking audience and the characters are speaking Spanish, the English is different because the tense in Spanish and the sentences are longer and it's more flowery. It has more. It has a little more romance. It sounds different. So I love your question. I mean, I've struggled with this question a lot. Like, what language are my characters speaking, even though they're speaking English? And Nadine, I don't know if you want to jump in about picking up the Yerma translation. Like, was it playable? I don't know.
I think I was really quite lucky. Sort of what Jill and Martine both were saying in working on their piece, that I felt I came into Yerma and everything was sort of, you guys had been developing it, Melia and Melinda both, for a long time before I joined in. So I felt it felt very luxurious to me. I mean, the script was already in a place that I felt like I could go deep into. And of course, we kept working and tweaking things, but what I think is fascinating as an actor is to ride that line between what feels active and what is highly poetic, and to grapple with those two things, and to grapple with reality and time, and to switch in those two places. I mean, I think I've seen many Yermas, and the translation that you did, Melinda, I felt was the most rooted in a very visceral, feminine place that felt real. It felt, even though it wasn't a specific set in a specific time, it felt specific, if that makes sense. And I think that's what we tried to do as actors as well, is bring the specificity to it.
I think that's great, you guys. Thank you so much. And Martine, you have the female protagonist at the center of Simona's search as well, and her trying to figure out her identity and her voice, really, right? I mean, even in the excerpt, it's sort of, there's a whole thing throughout the play about her identity as a daughter, as a young woman, how trauma affects her intimacy with other people, with this boyfriend who we meet, etc. And on the exhale, also had a woman at the center. Do you feel like I feel you have a sensitivity towards writing women characters. I don't know if you want to talk about that, or Jill, if that was something that you guys discussed while working on the exhale.
I think it was something that definitely came up during On the Exhale. I mean, On the Exhale was a very particular kind of story in the sense of, I think imagining, I think the things that we associate with a mother who is grieving the loss of a child, and the associations that an audience brings to that, I think were very, very powerful, and I think that's part of why. And also having to do with the way in which society projects certain gender roles onto, or certain assumptions about what it means to be a mother who is grieving, I think was a very, very vital part of that character, and how she imagined her identity and her relationship to gun violence. So I think that was what was very valuable. I think just like I do with any of my protagonists across any sort of range of possible identities, it's I think you can't assume anything, and then you have to think across any number of any number of kinds of conceptions of identity, thinking about like, what would this character be like if they had this identity versus this identity? What am I trying to say with that? So I feel like I'm always conscious of that across many different ways of conceiving of identity. I'm always thinking about that. I mean, I think that's probably also just informed by what it means to be stuck between two different identities in a sort of context of ethnicity and being the child of an immigrant, but also having a parent who's from the United States. And so I'm always thinking about, like, what does it mean to be who I am, and how people think of me and conceive of who I am.
That's great. Jill, sorry, Melinda, go.
I was just going to add, I think that it's such a powerful intersection to be a first generation anything, But I think as a writer, to be able to speak to, like you say, that in-betweenness, it's a really good place. It's really good for a writer to be in between things, or outside of something looking in, you know, knowing, or I think many writers feel like they're not quite part of something, but they can be on the outside, so they can have some critical examination, but also there's so much longing, and longing is really fertile for a writer too. Like, I wish I could understand that. I wish I could be part of that, but I'm going to stand outside and look at it. I think that it's very fertile what you're describing, Martin, and comes across in that reading, that, you know, her longing to know something that's shielded from her.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. I certainly feel like a kind of longing and always outside of things, an experience, never inside any experience. And I think that affects the way I write. And I think that both characters in Simona's Search and in On the Exhale they're very much loners. They're very much outside of, they don't feel like they connect with a lot of people's experience, and they're trying to figure out how to. I think in Simona's Search and then in On the Exhale, I think resolutely that character has decided that she does not want to connect with other people's experience.
Right.
And I think it's a great thing that you don't feel an obligation, because of that outside perspective, to constantly be writing plays that explicitly explore your identity. It gives you the freedom to write a play about whatever is on your mind, and then you innately bring that point of view to the piece. It doesn't have to be about the culture, but it's baked in there because of who you are.
Yeah, I think it's terrifying too, in a sense, because I feel like I'm never writing about my culture, because I feel in some ways like I feel like this is true, I think, of a lot of first generation children of immigrants, and they go to their parents' country and they're constantly reminded how much they're not from that place. Yeah. And then when working on a project in Argentina, I feel like I'm constantly reminded of that. And yet at the same time, being in the United States, I'm constantly reminded that I'm not of this place either. And I've actually witnessed people, like, in front of my face, argue about what my identity is without asking me.
I've been there with you on that. That's a really interesting question. I want to do a plug for the fact that Melinda's one-woman show, speaking of one-person shows, Mala, the extraordinary piece that she wrote and performed in, is going to be broadcast tomorrow night at 9. Am I right?
It's 10. They pushed it back to 10 because there's cursing in it. So I guess they thought the PBS audience was a little too delicate. So yes, there is cursing. Spoiler alert.
All right, so alert. I'm going to use this as a segue a little bit with both of you. Melinda, you're working on a piece right now for Audible, I know, in terms of working across platforms. And Martin, you've got so much TV, or do we call it TV? But so many other platforms that you're writing on. I'm a huge fan of Ozark, and I think, if I may, I'm going to bring on another actor, a dear friend, someone from Ozark. Laura, are you on? We can bring Laura Linney on to join us. This is a surprise to Martin. He didn't know I was going to invite Laura. And after that, I have to bring on Willis Sparks as well, given I'll explain, there's a connective web here of people knowing each other and knowing each other's work for a long time. So, hi, Laura. I think you're muted, dear.
Oh, hold on, hold on, the old person.
That's awesome. So, Laura, do you know Nadine?
Hello.
Have you guys ever worked together? I wasn't sure.
I haven't, but what a fantastic conversation to eavesdrop on.
So, Melinda, meet Laura.
Hi, such an honor.
Jill, I think you and Laura know each other.
You cross paths at some roundabout things, yeah.
So this is so I couldn't resist. Martin and I were talking about people to speak about his work, and I on the QT reached out to Laura. So welcome, Laura. I'm going to bring up, there is a Lorca connection, if you don't mind, Ms. Linney.
Go. Yes.
So the first, I'm an old Lorca fan, and I first started working on a version of Blood Wedding when I was in college. and there was a certain sophomore I begged to be in that production.
No way!
The blonde.
So Laura Linney,
The waxy blonde in the
she
middle
was
of Blood Wedding.
she was just speaking of identity and roles. We had a not very Spanish version, which I think is appropriate for Lorca, but that's a whole nother story.
It was great fun.
Anyway, welcome, Laura. I don't know if you want to talk about working with Martin on Ozark, and just I think he's blushing. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, it is a pleasure to talk about working with Martin on Ozark. And the thing that's so interesting is, you know, Ozark is so much about identity. I mean, in a totally different realm, but about a group of people who really don't know each other very well and don't know themselves. And television is a very different culture from the theater. And when you find yourself surrounded with someone who's like-minded, there is an instant relief that happens. And Martin's writing was so obviously came from a deep, thoughtful, mindful place. I was like, this guy's a playwright. I was like, I have a feeling. I smell a playwright here. And Martin wrote one of my favorite episodes ever in season 2, when Wendy is kidnapped and taken into the basement, and they have lots of conversations about religion and belonging and desire, and it's just a tremendous privilege and a pleasure to work with Martin on Ozark.
We're thrilled he's here with us and that we get to do him next season. Maren, are you on? Just because the more the merrier. Maren Ireland is joining us as well to talk about On the Exhale, but I don't know, we had trouble with logging in, I think. So so we have these 3 extraordinary actors joining us. Between Nadine, Laura, and Maren. I want to make sure I get to all of your questions. So I think I'm just I want to make sure I get Maren on. I also want to link this all back to Hartford Stage through one person, right, who connects some of us. Willis Sparks is also on. So Willis played the gentleman caller in Glass Menagerie in 2001, directed by our beloved Michael Wilson. I think we have a picture of Willis in that role. Here we go. And Willis, you're here as well. So Willis has the Hartford Stage connection, and then Laura, I believe you were in the audience seeing Willis perform this part.
Yes, and also what you're not mentioning is that we all went to college together.
Oh yeah, we all went to college together. Well, I mentioned you were in my play. I was a senior, you were a sophomore.
Willis actually saw that play. And I was lucky enough to see this production at Hartford Stage and loved it, just loved it.
So it's really a kick to have you all here. Ms. Maren Ireland, have you joined us now? And there's Willis. Welcome, Willis. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So Martin, Jill, I don't know if you got Nadine, if you know Willis Sparks, Melinda Lopez.
I know the Roundabout and the Huntington, but from a long time ago.
So, well, we're glad you're here to join us. I think at this point, hopefully Maren will join us at any moment. I think maybe best to open it up to questions from all of you who are participating with us. So Scott.
Who's directing your production?
I am.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Sorry, did I neglect to say that?
Amelia being a little modest. I just thought I'd just coax it out of you.
And yeah, that was sweet of you.
From having been in the audience in February 1984 for that Amelia directed, Laura acted production of Blood Wedding, I thought these are 2 of the most powerful 11-year-old theater artists I think I've ever seen. But in all seriousness, I remember that production. All these years later, I remember it very well. And I remember thinking that it really set a bar. I had just arrived at this particular school, and it really set a high bar for speaking of generational transmission of trauma, about what theater could actually do beyond just dazzle people.
So we traumatized you. Laura and I traumatized you.
I'm still traumatized, yes.
I've been traumatizing Willis for decades.
Right.
Oh, I have to throw this in, by the way. Speaking of audience, Laura was in the audience for the production of Glass Menagerie. Again, generational transmission of trauma, actually on stage. Laura was in the audience for that production of Glass Menagerie at Hartford, and there was an audience member who had, in my memory, it was a fainting spell, and woke up to find Laura with a playbill fanning this person awake at a time when Laura was already fabulously famous. So I remember thinking that theater goer is going to have a story that will last for probably multiple generations of their future as well.
You were all so dazzling in that production that she just fainted straight away.
I've never been happier or proud of her production than I've ever been than the one I did at Hartford Stage of Glass Menagerie.
Well, I will say to all of you joining us, this is a little bit, this isn't always how theater people behave when we're together, but there is a lot of mutual admiration for each other's work. I mean, I look at the faces of these extraordinary people on my screen, and I'm so grateful that to have Hartford Stage and be able to invite all of you to join me here. Scott, do you have questions from folks? I mean, this is such a great group, and I feel like I am being incredibly selfish here. I'm going to see there's many messages.
Yeah, we're getting a question about, wonder if each playwright could talk about the role and impact of actors on the development of new work. And what is that process like? Maybe Melinda or Martine?
Martine, why don't you take this one?
It really depends on the particular play. I mean, sometimes they are at the they're essential in the genesis of the entire idea. It really just varies by project. I feel like in a lot of my work, I have a pretty clear sense of what I'm trying to do early on, but I do think that they help me provide a lot of depth and a lot of grounding in terms of really defining and deepening the character, of carving out the sort of emotional subtleties beat by beat with me. I mean, it as I said, I'm not orthodox about what kind of process I work on, and so it really, they're essential, I would say, and they can be essential in any number of ways, from even just being there at the conception of the process to just helping me refine and understand in specific ways, like Marin did in On the Exhale, what is the relationship between the audience and the actor once the text is pretty close to being finished.
I'll just add, I don't know what the play is until I hear it read to me. I don't know what I've written until someone reads it back to me. And so like first readings, or even just getting people in around a table and I'll buy them pizza to hear the play it's a light year shift. And I learned so much. Mostly it's all the stuff I can cut, because actors can do so much more than, with one look or just one word, than all the speeches that I write. And I rely on actors so heavily in the development of my work. I mean, I feel utterly powerless without them.
Let me ask all of you, actually, this question, and Laura, I'll show my true colors that I'm really not that selfless here. I want you all to speak, and Jill, I'm curious about your perspective as well. What is the difference in doing work in New York or on other platforms versus at our country's leading regional theaters, right? The Huntington, Hartford Stage, I mean, the Center Theater Group, La Jolla Playhouse, all these theaters that are familiar to all of you. Why do these theaters matter? That's my utterly selfish question that I'm going to ask you, because at this dark moment of this pandemic, let us make no mistake, it is such a joy to be able to talk about your work and what comes next and how important it is to subscribe. And yes, I will plug that till the cows come home. But really, these theaters are in danger. All our theaters, and especially the ones outside of New York, I would argue, are truly in danger. So I'd love your thoughts on, you've all been in your various capacities at so many theaters. I'm thinking of Nadine at ACT and La Jolla, as well as on the East Coast. And Martin, you've been and had your plays produced all over. Melinda, ditto. Laura, you've performed at so many of our top stages. So why does it matter to have a theater in Hartford, in Boston, in San Francisco? And why is it different than just going to New York?
Well, first and foremost, it's access. It's access to, it's a portal that people can go through and actually have a type of connection that they can't experience anywhere else. And how that shifts a person from when the lights go down to when they leave the building, you are transformed in a very elemental, primal, spiritual, physical way. And I believe that human beings need that. And my father was a playwright, and I grew up going to all the regional theaters and seeing those plays being developed. And for a playwright particularly, for the scribes, for the people who write these things, for the erudite and the literate and the people who are using language in ways that have never been used before, these places are essential for things to be worked and recipes of language and plot and narrative to be combined that it just can't happen anywhere else. Right. There is a sense of space and intimacy at a regional theater that you can't really find under the glare of a commercial production in New York. And I've always found that environment to be tremendously intimate and very fulfilling. So it's really essential to artists of any ilk, and not just the playwrights, the designers and the lighting designers and the administrators and to everyone. So really access and excellence, really.
Is it different to work at these theaters than to work in New York for any of you?
Yeah, can I just say, I think one of the really striking differences, it's great to work in New York, it's exciting. But when you're working in Hartford, for example, it's the audience, it's their theater. They own it. They know the theater. The subscribers have sat in all different parts of the house, and they come into the theater with a tremendous sense of excitement to see how this set will be different in their theater and which new actors are being brought into their theater. And that sense of ownership for an actor is really exciting. You're presenting yourself to people on their ground rather than a ground that just feels like yours. And I think that on the other side of this event that we're all living through right now, I'm just thinking ahead to next season, whenever things are open again. I think that the feeling as people walk into Hartford Stage and sit down in their familiar seats and look at the set of the production they're about to see, I think it's going to be absolutely electric. I think it's going to be thrilling for the audience. I think the actors backstage are going to be jumping out of their skin. I think that everybody in that building is going to be wired to see theater because it's something that's been taken away. And when it's a theater where you feel ownership of the theater, where you have a history with the theater, I think that feeling of excitement and electricity is going to be every bit as strong, if not stronger than it is, frankly, in New York City.
Yeah, and being based at a New York theater, it's very clear to me that the American theater is this interconnected ecosystem. None of what's happening on New York stages exists without what's happening on the regional stages. And I think that so much of the great work that you end up seeing in New York only happens, hi Marin, because it's getting its start on these regional stages, and the audiences there are the ones giving these writers and designers and directors and actors the information they need to keep working. It's a privilege to have all of those theaters developing new work so that wherever it goes next, it just gets better and better.
So I need to just welcome Maren Ireland. We're so glad you're here, who's also worked with Martin, and we saw the photo of you in On the Exhale, and Tony nominee and known for as being constantly off Broadway, and one of our great leading ladies, along with Nadine and Laura. So it's really to have the three of you. Willis, you're no slouch, but you're really between Nadine, Laura, and Maren.
I'm good with that.
All right. I won't do introductions. I hope, I know some of you know each other and have worked together. So, but we're thrilled you're here. Martin, were you going to say something about?
Oh yeah, no, just the question about like working in New York versus working outside of New York. I think that when you work in New York, which is a wonderful, exciting, charged experience, it feels like there's always a third presence besides the work and the audience, which is like the buzz around town and like the broader sort of discussion around New York. And then of course, as is reflected nationally about the work. Whereas I feel like when you work outside of New York, and I also think that's also true of a city like Chicago as well, because I think a lot of people look to Chicago for its theatrical influence. When you work outside of either of those places, though, there is a beauty in it literally just being about knowing that like you're having this experience in this moment in time with this audience, and people might not know about it necessarily. They could, but they might not outside of that experience. But there's a beautiful focus in that, and I think it really does teach you to cherish what is unique about the theater, which is we're going to have an experience together, and the experience is what matters above all else. It's not about posterity; it's about the experience.
I would add to that. I completely agree, and I think that there's a different kind of breath that exists when you work outside of New York, that you feel just inherently, that you can take different kinds of risks. I think when you are working at a regional theater, and also I think the importance of regional theaters is even more present now. I mean, in this time of isolation and a kind of individual kind of life, when we're gobbling up, Netflix and Hulu and any kind of entertainment and art that we can. And I think, whenever the time comes that we can go out into the world, I think it's even more important to be able to be in a room together and to, have the lights come down and to really go through a journey together, because we are all connected. It's actually a lie, this individualism that we feel now. We all affect each other, and that is the power of theater. That's the power of sitting in theater, being in the theater, receiving, giving. We are all connected, and I think I'm really actually very excited for the work that will come after this time.
I think we're all hopeful, right? We'll say, I just want to sort of do a little welcome home to Maren, because she's a graduate of the Hart School. So I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, we need you back at Hartford Stage.
I know. It was our the Hart School and Hartford Stage, that was sort of the beginning of that. I know that it's a little more of a interwoven kind of relationship now, but that was the theater that we all, saw shows multiple times and dreamed of working at. So I got to make it happen.
Yeah, we're here, and so I just want to throw a quick question to Jill, since there is the mystery of dramaturgy. Can you, since this is one of the great American mysteries, can you just speak a little bit about what you see as the dramaturg doing in the room, directors, actors, playwrights, and how do you fit in?
I think you could ask 10 dramaturgs and get 10 different answers, honestly. The one thing that I've learned is that there's no template for what dramaturgy is. It really varies from process to process, and some playwrights want your input from page one, and some playwrights won't show you a script until 2 years after they've been working on it, and some people want their hand held, and some people just need to rant at you, and it's never the same twice. So on one show, I feel like I'll be doing research and handing that over to help the writer, and I feel like on another project, it'll be just a completely different thing. Sometimes you're really helpful in the rehearsal room. Sometimes I feel like I'm useless until previews. You have to stay away to be fresh eyes. It's completely different every time. And I feel like, I was just saying this the other day, I feel like you almost have to develop a different love language with every playwright that you're working with.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time, I'm sort of horrified, having sort of promised to keep this within the confines of an hour, and here we are at an hour, and the wealth of voices and talent that is on the screen with all of you. So very grateful. We've been ending these hours with a communal reading of a piece. And so I'm gonna turn us to that reading, and then we'll come back to all of us, but you'll start seeing more faces from the Hartford community. We're gonna be reading today an excerpt of Lorca's, because how could we not? So I will start bringing in some of our folks who will be reading. This is from a speech he gave about the theater. So you're gonna start seeing faces of Hartford Stage staff, of actors who've been affiliated with us, of folks who are connected to some of the panel this year as well, some of our board members, and here we all come, and there's our friend Rob from TheaterWorks as well. So we have colleagues, community members, board members, actors, joining in this reading. We have so many more questions for all of you. I'm so sorry that we don't get to, you know, spend more time. I hope you'll all come back. I'll wrap up after this, but first, Martin, will you start us off on the Lorca?
Yes. I am speaking tonight not as author or as poet, nor as a simple student of the rich panorama of human life,
but as an ardent defender of the theater and its social action.
Michelle's not on. I will read Michelle's, sorry. Or Michelle, are you there? Okay. The theater is one of the most expressive and useful instruments for the education of a country.
And the barometer that measures its greatness or decline.
A theater that is well oriented in all its branches, from tragedy to vaudeville.
It can change, in just a few years, the sensibility of a people.
And a theater that has been destroyed and where hooves take the place of wings can lull an entire nation to sleep.
The theater is a school of laughter and lamentation and a free tribunal
where men can introduce as evidence old or mistaken morals.
And explain with living examples eternal norms of man's heart and feeling. This was Lorca's address on the importance of the theater. I can't think of a better group of people to share this conversation with than all of you who've spoken and who've called in. This is a hard time. I guess I have to end with sort of the excitement that I feel in spite of the darkness of this moment about what we're producing next season, how we will be here next season. We want you all to be with us next season. We want you all to be there for Martin's play with us. And I will just say why it matters to subscribe, because we didn't really get to talk about that. But Mark Lemos once said that when he was programming Hartford Stage, he thought of the 6 plays as 6 separate events. And I think each of our plays is an event in conversation with the other works in the season, in the same way that all of you wonderful people have been in conversation with us. And you really need to be part of a whole conversation with us and commit to us as an institution. We're here. You can see all these extraordinary artists who are willing to give up their time for Hartford Stage. So we're thrilled about next season. We're thrilled, Martin, that you're going to be joining us. We're gonna have to bring Melinda to do her Audible piece as well with us. That's on the voice. And just think of all these actors who are now begging to return. And Jill, I hear you freelance, so I can maybe drag you to Hartford Stage as well. So much to look forward to. We need everyone get a glass. It's time for, 3rd week. We're still toasting. We're still drinking. I'm looking for my glass. I remembered to pour one this time. So here we'll start seeing all of you, I hope, appearing. How many of us were on today? Let's see. Over 100 people joining us. So Cynthia, are you there to toast with me? I'm not.
Here.
There you are. There you are. I have to move the screens. Oh, lots of faces, lots of great faces. Hello, all. Thank you to the community of Hartford. Thank you to our board. Thank you to our amazing staff. A shout out to all of you who are working so hard for Hartford Stage, and those of you who are waiting to return to work with Hartford Stage. We love you. Thank you to our guests. You've made today really special for us. And we'll see you next week for Seen and Heard Live. We're getting better and better at this, I hope. But more importantly, we'll see you next season in the theater.
Cheers.
So, love to everyone, to Hartford Stage. L'chaim. Happy Passover.
Happy
Easter.
Happy Passover.
So.
Cheers and thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much. Laura, Martine.
Thank you.
Lauren, Nadine, Melinda. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jill, Willis. Wonderful to see you all. Much love.
See you next week.
See you next week. Mwah.